this once used to be Cabarrus County, Mecklenburg County. I can't remember which one it was, but it was all one county as far as the state line in South Carolina. And so that meant that a lot of people kept coming this way, and people settled. Now, the man who's ended up over at Latta Plantation, he was there, and there were people who owned plantations in Cabarrus County, but I don't exactly remember all of them. But my family started out at Hopewell by the Catawba River. And the Catawba River was not one that you could navigate a boat on. It was shallow. If you've ever seen it, it's got rocks on it. So that's why they flooded Lake Norman quite a few years later. And so my history, my ancestors, excuse me, started over off Batesford Road at Hopewell Presbyterian Church. And so the story goes that my oldest ancestor, Eli Alexander, was born of a white woman. And at that time, if a white woman gave birth to a black child, they killed the baby just right away. But this time they didn't do it, so they took the baby down to the quarters, which is the section that a city or plantation had where all the enslaved people lived, and they raised the baby there. His name was Eli. The planter who owned Eli was a doctor. And so he taught Eli's children, the girls, how to be midwives. And because every plantation needed, what are those people that made iron? Blacksmith. So his two sons were blacksmiths. But Eli had two wives. One was Caroline and one was Matilda. And we don't know from which wife we came. We don't know which one. But anyway, we're here. And so they were over in what you call Hopewell. And when I went over to Hopewell, there was this great big, this is before I knew anything about being enslaved, or this was my passion to learn about our history. There was a great big tub. And in this tub, I could feel the spirit of the ancestors. I don't know if you guys ever felt that, but it gives you the creepiest feeling ever. And I didn't know what to make of it except get out of here. And so I didn't understand it. I just wanted to leave it behind me. But I have a good feeling that that's where we originated, and all of the treatment we got was not that great. But you can imagine in an enslaved, chattel slavery time, it wasn't good. And so that's how we got here. That's the Alexanders. Now, Eli had his last daughter that I know of, which is my great-great-grandmother. That was Anna Alexander Brown. And she married Andy Brown, and they lived somewhere in the area. I can't say, just a stone's throw away, not far, because we didn't move far from our roots because I'm still here. And so Mama she was born, we figure she was born in about 1880, because she was 90-some when she died in 1976. So Mama ruled the roost around our house. She was the dominant figure, and we just loved her dearly. But anyway, she had 13 children. So Mama Tilly, at about 14 or 15, ran off with Josephus Turner. And Anna had a fit, but it was too late then. And so Anna and Andy Brown, they were kind of prosperous people. They owned a Franklin car. If you ever go back and research that, that was a car back in the early 1900s. But Mama married Josephus Turner, and we don't know much about him because, the men don't bring the family home with them. And they had 13 children, and the oldest one that I can remember was Annie Mae, and she was born in 1900. And how I remember, she was 72 in 1972 when she died. And they live in Mooresville. Well, now I got to go back and tell you a little bit about Eli Alexander. Eli Alexander's father, his white dad, gave him lots of land. And so he was able to farm and have sharecroppers, black sharecroppers on his property. Because that, if that was how it happened, that's what you did for that time. And for some reason, he was instrumental in doing something at Johnson C. Smith University. We don't know what, but because of that, Mama Tilly, my great-grandmother, named one of her sons DeWitt. And so, at one time, the school had the name DeWitt in it, and Eli used to keep some of the people who worked there, the professors there, at his house. but he went on to move to Mooresville, where he was instrumental in starting a church, Watkins Chapel in Mooresville. That was a real big city because this was still the back country. And so when he got to Mooresville, he was one of the founding members of Watkins Chapel Church. And because he thought he was a bigwig, he and his family sat at the front. And according to your importance, you sat at the front and you wore a big crinoline slip so that your dress was was very bouffant and people couldn't sit next to you, so you had the whole seat to yourself. And that was just what he did. And he was proud of his heritage, and I guess everybody needs to be proud of their heritage no matter what it is. Eli had 2 sons, and both were blacksmiths. But in this area, one town could only support 1 blacksmith. So he had to move to another town, and I don't know which town that was. But his 2 daughters were midwives. And Anna was a midwife in this area because she didn't birth me, but she was still birthing children, helping to birth children when I was born in 1946. But her sister, what was her name? Liza, lived in a place called Fishertown or Kannapolis or Concord, North Carolina. And so that's our history for them. Now I'm going to transition to Pottstown. Now it's very interesting that Eli had a son who was the blacksmith of Huntersville, and he lived uptown on Church Street. When you get all the way up to Church Street now, where they're working on the road, that was where he lived. I saw his house in 1982, but I can't remember exactly which one it is or was because they tore it down. And so this is my stomping ground, lived here all my life, and so Pottstown has become home to all of my ancestors. We don't know any other place to call home except Pottstown.